The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Brew and Pages, a cozy coffee shop nestled in downtown Seattle. Maya Chen sat at her usual corner table, her fingers dancing across the braille display connected to her laptop. The familiar sounds of the cafe, the hiss of the espresso machine, the gentle murmur of conversations, the rustle of newspaper pages, created her daily symphony of productivity. At 26, Maya had built a modest but successful freelance editing business, specializing in academic papers and novels. Her keen ear for language and detail had earned her a loyal clientele, though most of her clients had never met her in person. Today, she was putting the finishing touches on a particularly challenging manuscript when an unfamiliar voice interrupted her concentration. "Excuse me, are you Maya Chen?" She looked up, recognizing the voice from their brief phone conversation 2 days prior. "Mr. Harrison, you're early." James Harrison slid into the chair across from her, and Maya caught the subtle scent of expensive cologne mixed with the crisp autumn air that clung to his coat. She had agreed to meet this potential new client, a businessman who needed help editing a proposal for a major merger. What she hadn't expected was the nervous energy radiating from him, his fingers drumming against the table, the slight tremor in his voice. I have a confession to make," James began, his voice lower now. "I don't actually need editing services." Maya's hands stilled on her keyboard. "I'm sorry. I need your help with something else entirely, and I realize how this is going to sound." He paused, and she could hear him taking a deep breath. "I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend for one evening." The coffee shop noise seemed to fade as Maya processed his words. She leaned back in her chair, her expression shifting from confusion to incredulity. "Mr. Harrison, I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm a freelance editor, not an escort service." No, that's not," James fumbled, his chair creaking as he leaned forward. "I'm the CEO of Harrison Tech Solutions. Tomorrow night is our company's annual investor gala. My business partner, Richard Blackwood, has been making moves to push me out of my own company. He's convinced the board that I'm not stable enough to lead, partly because I'm 32 and still single. He keeps bringing up how settled family men make better long-term investments." Maya's fingers found her coffee cup, using the warmth to ground herself as she listened to this stranger's bizarre proposition. "And you think showing up with a fake girlfriend will solve your corporate politics problem? Richard is bringing his wife and his newest investor, a man who's very traditional, very family-oriented. If I show up alone again, it reinforces Richard's narrative that I'm not committed to anything long-term." James's voice carried a desperation that made Maya's chest tighten despite herself. "I know how this sounds, and I know we just met, but I've been watching you here for weeks." "Watching me?" Maya's voice sharpened. "Not like that," James said quickly. "I come here every morning for coffee. I've seen how you carry yourself, how you interact with people. You're confident, articulate, professional. When I heard you talking to the barista about your editing work, I realized you might be perfect for this." Maya set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. "Mr. Harrison, let me get this straight. You want to hire me to pretend to be your girlfriend because you think I'm professional enough to fool your business associates." "I'll pay you $5,000 for one evening," James said quietly. The number hung in the air between them. Maya's breath caught. $5,000 would cover her rent for 3 months and allow her to finally replace her aging computer equipment. But the whole situation felt surreal. "Why me specifically?" she asked. "Surely someone in your social circle would be more suitable." James was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, more genuine. "Because everyone in my social circle either wants something from me or is connected to Richard somehow. I need someone who has no stake in my business, someone who won't use this situation against me later." He paused. "And honestly, because you seem like someone who values honesty, even in complicated situations." Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Honesty? You're asking me to lie to a room full of people." "I'm asking you to help me save my company," James replied. "Harrison Tech employs over 200 people. If Richard succeeds in forcing me out, he'll gut the company and sell it off in pieces. Those people will lose their jobs." Despite herself, Maya found her anger softening. She could hear the genuine concern in his voice, the weight of responsibility he carried. Mr. Harrison. James. Please. James, she continued, I appreciate your situation, but I'm not an actress. I'm a blind woman who spends most of her time editing manuscripts in coffee shops. I don't know how to be someone's fake girlfriend at a fancy corporate event. You don't have to be fake, James said earnestly. Just be yourself. You're intelligent, well-spoken, and more put together than half the people who'll be there. We just need to let them assume we're together. Maya's mind raced. The money would be life-changing, but the whole situation felt like stepping into someone else's life. What exactly would this involve? One evening. 3 hours, maybe 4. We arrive together, mingle with investors and board members, have dinner, and leave. That's it. And you think no one will figure out that we just met 2 days ago? James leaned forward, and Maya caught the rustle of papers. I've thought about that. We'll say we've been dating quietly for a few months. You're private because of your work. Clients value discretion. It actually makes perfect sense. Maya rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. This is insane. I know it is, James agreed. But I'm desperate, Maya. I built this company from nothing. My father died when I was 15, and my mother worked 3 jobs to put me through college. Harrison Tech isn't just my career. It's my way of honoring everything she sacrificed for me. I can't let Richard destroy that because he thinks being single makes me unreliable. The raw emotion in his voice made Maya's chest tighten. She understood the weight of responsibility, the fear of losing something you'd worked so hard to build. Her own business was small, but it represented her independence, her proof that she could succeed despite the assumptions others made about her capabilities. If I agreed, and I'm not saying I am, what would happen after? When people ask about me next month, next year? We break up quietly after a few weeks. These people don't actually care about my personal life. They just want to see stability. Once the merger goes through and my position is secure, it won't matter anymore. Maya sat in silence, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. The reasonable part of her mind screamed that this was a terrible idea. But another part, the part that remembered every landlord who'd hesitated when she mentioned her guide dog, every potential client who'd seemed surprised by her competence, understood the appeal of proving she could step into any world and belong there. $5,000, she said finally. For one evening. Yes. And you'll handle all the details. What I should wear, how we met, our relationship history. Everything. I'll even arrange for professional styling if you want. Maya took a deep breath, tasting the coffee-scented air and listening to the rain that still pelted the windows. James, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this because I think your plan is good, or because I believe fake relationships solve real problems. I'm doing this because $5,000 changes my life, and because you seem like someone who genuinely cares about the people who work for you. Does that mean yes? It means I'm probably making a huge mistake, but yes. Maya extended her hand across the table. One evening. 3 to 4 hours. And then we never speak of this again. James's hand was warm when it clasped hers, his grip firm but not overwhelming. Thank you, Maya. I promise you won't regret this. As Maya gathered her laptop and cane, preparing to leave the coffee shop that had become the setting for the most unusual business proposal of her life, she couldn't shake the feeling that James Harrison was wrong about one thing. She had a distinct feeling she was going to regret this very much. 24 hours later, Maya stood in front of her bedroom mirror, running her hands over the elegant black dress that had been delivered to her apartment that morning. The fabric was silk, cut in a classic A-line that fell just below her knees, sophisticated without being flashy. James had included a note explaining that he described her to a personal shopper, providing her measurements based on observation and educated guesses. The fact that he'd gotten everything perfectly right was either impressive or slightly unsettling. Her phone buzzed with a text, "Picking you up in 20 minutes. Remember, we've been dating for 3 months, we met at a charity art auction, and you're nervous about meeting my business associates. Just be yourself beyond that. J." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she applied lipstick, a shade the personal shopper had described as classic red that complements your skin tone. She'd spent the morning rehearsing their backstory, but now that the moment was approaching, the whole plan seemed increasingly ridiculous. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 p.m., and Maya's guide dog, Luna, a golden retriever, immediately went to attention. Maya opened the door to find James standing in the hallway, and even without sight, she could sense his nervous energy. "You look—" James started, then seemed to lose his words. "You look beautiful, Maya." "Thank you." She grabbed her purse and Luna's harness. "You clean up pretty well yourself, judging by the expensive cologne and what sounds like a very crisp tuxedo." "You're bringing Luna." Maya paused, her hand on Luna's harness. "Is that a problem?" "I should have asked." "No, not at all," James said quickly. I should have thought about it. Will she be okay in a crowded event?" "She's a working dog, James. Crowds are part of her job." Maya's voice carried a slight edge. "Unless you think having a guide dog will somehow compromise your image?" "That's not what I meant," James replied, his voice softer. "I'm sorry. I'm nervous, and I'm not thinking clearly. Of course Luna should come. She's part of who you are." Maya felt some of her tension ease. "Thank you. And for what it's worth, I'm nervous too." The ride to the Four Seasons Hotel was filled with last-minute coaching. James described the key players they'd encounter: Richard Blackwood, his business partner and current adversary; Helena Morrison, the board chair who'd been wavering in her support; and David Chen, no relation to Maya, the traditional Taiwanese-American investor whose backing could secure James's position. "Remember," James said as their car pulled up to the hotel, "we're comfortable with each other. 3 months is long enough to have inside jokes, but not so long that we're completely relaxed." Maya heard the car door open and felt James's hand gently guide her elbow. "Trust me to guide you when we're walking together," she murmured. "Don't grab my arm or try to steer me, just offer your arm and let me hold on." As they entered the hotel ballroom, Maya was struck by the overwhelming sensory input: the clink of champagne glasses, the rustle of expensive fabric, the low hum of important conversations, and the subtle scent of luxury, high-end perfumes mixing with the floral arrangements she could smell throughout the room. "James," a booming voice approached them. "And you must be the mysterious girlfriend we've heard absolutely nothing about." Maya felt James's arm tense under her hand. "Richard," James replied coolly. "I'd like you to meet Maya Chen. Maya, this is my business partner, Richard Blackwood." Maya extended her hand with a smile she hoped looked natural. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Richard. James has told me so much about the company." Richard's handshake was firm and assessing. "Has he now? And what do you do, Maya?" "I'm a freelance editor," Maya replied, falling into the character they'd rehearsed. "I specialize in academic and literary work. It keeps me busy, and I travel quite a bit for clients, which is why James and I have kept things quiet. Privacy is important in my line of work." "How discreet of you both," Richard said, and Maya could hear the skepticism in his voice. "And how did you two meet?" This was the moment Maya had been dreading. "At a charity art auction," she said, squeezing James's arm slightly. "I was there researching for a client who collects contemporary pieces. James bid on the same sculpture I was interested in. And let me guess," James picked up the story smoothly, "she gave me such a passionate lecture about the artist's technique that I forgot all about the bidding war and asked her to dinner instead." Maya felt a flutter of surprise at how naturally James had expanded on their rehearsed story, adding details that made it feel more real. "He was very charming," she added, allowing a genuine smile to creep into her voice. "Even if he did outbid me on that sculpture. Which I later found out she never actually wanted," James continued, his voice carrying what sounded like real affection. "She was just trying to drive up the price for the charity." Richard's laugh sounded forced. "How romantic." "Well, James, I hate to steal you away, but Helena Morrison is here, and she's eager to discuss the quarterly projections." As Richard led James away, Maya felt a moment of panic. She was alone in a room full of strangers, surrounded by conversations she couldn't visually track. Luna pressed against her leg, sensing her tension. "You must be Maya." Maya turned toward the new voice, a woman with a warm, slightly accented tone. "I'm Dr. Sarah Kim, Helena Morrison's wife. I saw you come in with James and thought I'd introduce myself. It's not often we see James with anyone at these events." "It's lovely to meet you, Dr. Kim," Maya replied, grateful for the friendly approach. James mentioned that these gatherings can be a bit intense. Sarah laughed. That's diplomatic. They're corporate theater at its finest. But please, call me Sarah. I'm a pediatric surgeon, so I appreciate directness. That's a beautiful guide dog. What's her name? Luna, Maya said, relaxing slightly. And thank you. She's wonderful at her job, though I think she's a bit overwhelmed by all the fancy smells in here. I imagine so. My daughter would be fascinated. She's 8 and absolutely convinced she wants to train service dogs when she grows up. Sarah paused. Can I ask what you think of all this corporate drama? James seems like he's under tremendous pressure. Maya chose her words carefully. I think James cares deeply about his company and the people who work for him. Sometimes that level of responsibility can be isolating. Sarah murmured thoughtfully. Helena's been watching this partnership deteriorate for months. She likes James personally, but the board needs to see stability. A CEO's personal life shouldn't matter, but in reality, it does, Maya finished. Unfortunately, yes. But seeing him tonight, seeing you two together, there's something different about him. He seems more grounded. Before Maya could respond, she felt a familiar presence at her side. James had returned, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. I hope Sarah hasn't been boring you with hospital stories, James said, but his tone was warm. Actually, we were discussing the politics of corporate image, Sarah replied with amusement. Maya has some interesting perspectives. She usually does, James said, and Maya could hear genuine fondness in his voice. It's one of the things I love about her. She sees through all the pretense to what actually matters. Maya felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected sincerity in his words. This wasn't part of their script, but it felt so real that for a moment, she almost believed it herself. The evening continued with a blur of introductions and carefully choreographed conversations. Maya found herself surprised by how naturally she and James fell into their roles. He described artwork on the walls for her benefit. She shared edited versions of amusing client stories, and together they created the image of a couple comfortable in each other's company. During dinner, seated at a table with Helena Morrison and David Chen, Maya found herself genuinely engaged in conversation about the intersection of technology and accessibility, a topic where her personal experience and James's professional expertise created natural common ground. It's refreshing, Helena said quietly to James during a brief lull, to see you with someone who challenges you intellectually. Maya clearly doesn't just agree with everything you say. She never has, James replied, glancing at Maya with something that looked almost like real affection. It keeps me honest. As the evening wound down, Maya realized that something had shifted. The nervous energy that had defined their earlier interactions had evolved into something more comfortable, more genuine. When James helped her with her coat, his touch lingered just a moment longer than necessary. When she laughed at his quietly sarcastic commentary about the other guests, he seemed to genuinely enjoy her amusement. In the car ride home, they sat in comfortable silence for several minutes before James spoke. That went better than I expected, he said. Richard still suspects something, Maya replied. But I think Helena and David were convinced. You were perfect tonight, James said softly. Better than perfect, actually. You were yourself. I didn't expect that to be so. So what? James was quiet for a long moment. So appealing, he finished finally. Maya felt her heart skip, but she pushed the feeling aside. We had a deal, James. One evening. I know, he said quickly. I'm not asking for anything more. I wanted you to know that tonight meant something to me. Beyond the business aspect. As they pulled up to Maya's apartment building, James walked her to the door. In the hallway outside her apartment, they stood facing each other in the fluorescent lighting, the glamour of the evening suddenly feeling distant. Thank you, James said. For everything. The money will be in your account tomorrow morning. Maya nodded, fishing for her keys. I hope things work out with the company. Maya, James said as she unlocked her door. If you'd ever want to have coffee sometime. Not for business. Just. Maya turned back to him, her hand on the doorframe. James, don't. Don't what? Don't blur the lines. We both knew what this was tonight. Let's not complicate it by pretending it was something else. James was quiet for a moment, then nodded. You're right. Of course you're right. But as Maya closed the door behind her and leaned against it, Luna settling at her feet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between them in that ballroom. Something that had nothing to do with business deals or fake relationships. Something that felt dangerously real. 3 weeks later, Maya was attempting to focus on a particularly dense academic paper about medieval literature when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer. Maya. It's James. James Harrison. Maya's heart skipped, though she tried to keep her voice neutral. Hello, James. How did things go with your business situation? Better than expected, actually. The merger went through, Richard's been relegated to a much smaller role, and my position is secure. He paused. Helena Morrison told me she was impressed by my grounded new perspective and my choice in companions. I'm glad it worked out for you. Maya, I'm calling because... James seemed to struggle with his words. I can't stop thinking about that night. Not the business part, the other parts. The conversations we had, the way you laughed at my terrible jokes about Richard's toupee, the way you fit so naturally into that world. Maya closed her laptop, giving the conversation her full attention despite herself. James, we talked about this. I know what we talked about. But I also know what I felt that night, and I don't think it was just on my side. His voice grew more confident. Maya, I'd like to take you to dinner. A real dinner, not a business arrangement. No fake relationships, no corporate politics. Just us, getting to know each other without any pretense. Maya was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently stroking Luna's head. That's not a good idea. Why not? Because... Maya struggled to articulate the fears that had been plaguing her since that night. Because that evening was make-believe, James. You don't actually know me. You know the version of me that showed up to help you solve a problem. That's not true, James said firmly. The woman who challenged David Chen on accessibility design wasn't pretending. The woman who told Sarah Kim that honest story about overcoming your professor's low expectations, that was real. The woman who called Richard's bluff about the quarterly projections with facts I didn't even know you knew, that was you, Maya. The real you. Maya felt her resolve wavering. James. I've been coming to Brew & Page's every morning for 3 weeks, James continued. Not to bother you, just hoping to run into you. To see if what I felt that night was real or just adrenaline from the whole situation. You've been watching me again? Badly, James admitted with a laugh. Very badly. Yesterday, I ordered 5 different coffee drinks because I kept getting distracted by watching you work and forgot what I'd already ordered. The barista thinks I have a serious caffeine problem. Despite herself, Maya smiled. That does sound like you have a problem. Have dinner with me, James said. One real dinner. If there's nothing there, if it was all just the artificial situation we were in, then we'll know. But if there is something... Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of a decision that felt much more significant than agreeing to one evening of pretense. James, I need you to understand something. That night, I was playing a role. I was the sophisticated girlfriend who could hold her own in corporate circles. In real life, I work in coffee shops and spend Friday nights editing manuscripts and watching Netflix audio descriptions with my dog. That sounds perfect to me, James said softly. I have bad days where my independence frustrates me, where I get angry at accessibility barriers and take it out on people who don't deserve it. I'm not always the poised woman you met that night. Maya, I'm a workaholic who stress eats pizza and falls asleep at my desk more often than in my bed. I have panic attacks about whether I'm good enough for the company my father never got to see. The poised CEO you met that night isn't my default setting either. Maya felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of shared vulnerability. One dinner, she said finally. One dinner, James agreed. Somewhere quiet, no corporate politics, no performances. Just us figuring out if we actually like each other when we're not saving my company. They agreed to meet at a small Italian restaurant in Maya's neighborhood, chosen because it was Luna-friendly and because Maya knew the layout well enough to feel confident. As Maya prepared for what felt like her first real first date in years, she found herself both excited and terrified. James arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time nervously reviewing the menu and questioning his choice of restaurant. When Maya walked in with Luna, he stood immediately, then sat back down, then stood again, clearly overthinking every gesture. "You're nervous," Maya observed as she settled into the booth across from him. "Terrified," James admitted. "3 weeks ago, we were playing characters. Tonight, I have to be myself and hope you actually like who that is." Maya smiled, feeling some of her own tension ease. "Well, you've already passed the first test. Which is, you're honest about being terrified." The James Harrison from that corporate event would never admit to being anything less than completely confident. Their conversation over dinner was different from their careful choreography at the gala. James told her about growing up as the scholarship kid at private school, about the imposter syndrome that still plagued him in corporate settings. Maya shared stories about her graduate program, about the professors who tried to discourage her from pursuing editing because they couldn't imagine how a blind person could succeed in a visual field. "The irony," Maya said over dessert, "is that I'm probably better at catching inconsistencies and plot holes than most sighted editors because I'm not distracted by formatting or layout. I hear the story structure more clearly. Like how you heard the inconsistencies in Richard's financial projections that night," James said. "I noticed that, the way you tilted your head when he was talking, like you were processing something that didn't add up." "You were watching me pretty carefully," Maya observed. James looked embarrassed. "I was watching you carefully before that night too, if I'm being honest. Not in a creepy way," he added quickly. "But there was something about the way you navigated that coffee shop, the confidence in how you interacted with people, the way you clearly had your own world figured out. It was attractive. Even though I'm blind." James paused, considering his words. "Maya, I'm not going to pretend that your blindness isn't part of who you are, because that would be dismissive and dishonest. But it's not what attracted me to you. What attracted me was watching someone who'd clearly figured out how to be completely herself in any situation." Maya felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the relief of being seen as a complete person rather than an inspiration or a tragedy. That's exactly the right thing to say." "Is it?" "Because I've been terrified of saying the wrong thing for 3 weeks." "James," Maya said, reaching across the table to find his hand, "you hired me to pretend to be your girlfriend because you thought I seemed professional and confident. But you're asking me to dinner now because you think I'm interesting and attractive. Do you see the difference?" "I see the difference," James said, his thumb tracing over her knuckles. "The question is, what do you see in me? Besides a guy who was desperate enough to hire a fake girlfriend." Maya considered the question seriously. "I see someone who cares about his employees enough to put himself through an incredibly awkward situation to protect their jobs. I see someone who notices details, like making sure Luna would be comfortable at the gala, like describing the artwork so I could participate in conversations about it. And I see someone who's brave enough to admit when he's scared." They talked until the restaurant staff began cleaning around them, lost in conversation that ranged from serious to silly. James described his terrible cooking attempts. Maya shared her disaster-prone experiments with online dating. They discovered a shared love of true crime podcasts and a shared hatred of movies with unnecessary voiceovers. As James walked Maya and Luna home, their conversation continued on the sidewalk outside her building. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the distant promise of winter. "I had a really good time tonight," Maya said, finding herself reluctant to end the evening. "So did I," James replied. "Good enough that I'd like to do it again, if you're interested." Maya smiled. "I think I'd like that." They stood facing each other in the glow of the streetlight, the comfortable conversation giving way to a charged silence. Maya could hear James's breathing, could sense him leaning slightly closer. "Maya," he said softly, "can I kiss you?" The question hung in the air between them. This wasn't part of any performance, wasn't for the benefit of investors or board members. This was James asking, and Maya wanting to say yes with an intensity that surprised her. "Yes," she whispered. James's hand found her cheek, his touch gentle and questioning. When his lips met hers, it was nothing like the brief, performative kiss they'd shared for appearances at the gala's end. This kiss was slow, exploratory, real. Maya felt herself melting into it, her hand finding the lapel of his coat to anchor herself. When they broke apart, both were breathing harder. That was... James started. Different, Maya finished. Very different. James's forehead rested against hers. Maya, I need you to know, whatever this is between us, it's not about the arrangement we had. That was business. This is... personal, Maya said. Very personal. They kissed again, and this time Maya knew with absolute certainty that what she was feeling had nothing to do with corporate galas or fake relationships. This was attraction, genuine and mutual and surprisingly intense. When they finally separated, James's hand was still on her cheek. I should let you get inside, he said, though he made no move to step away. You should, Maya agreed, also not moving. But I don't want to. I don't want you to either. They stood there for another moment, caught between the sensible decision to take things slowly and the pull of genuine connection that neither had expected. James, Maya said finally, I'm scared. Of what? Of this being real, she admitted. The fake relationship was safe because it had clear boundaries. This doesn't have boundaries, and that's terrifying. James's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. What if we make our own boundaries? What if we take this as slowly as you need, figure it out as we go? Maya looked up at him, wishing she could see his expression but reading everything she needed in his voice, in his touch, in the way he was giving her space to be uncertain. Okay, she said. Let's figure it out as we go. Okay, James agreed, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. But Maya... Yes. For the record, this is already the most real thing I've felt in years. As Maya unlocked her apartment door and James waited to make sure she got inside safely, both of them knew that whatever had started as a business arrangement had transformed into something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. 3 months later, when James brought Maya as his real girlfriend to the company's holiday party, Richard Blackwood approached them with a knowing smile. You know, he said to James, I never believed that story about meeting at an art auction. Maya felt James tense beside her, but she squeezed his hand reassuringly. You're right, she said to Richard with a smile. We actually met in a coffee shop. He spilled espresso on my laptop, and I gave him such a lecture about being more careful that he asked me out just to make up for it. Richard laughed. Now that I believe. James has always been clumsy when he's nervous. As Richard walked away, James leaned down to whisper in Maya's ear. That's not how we met either. No, Maya agreed, turning to smile up at him. But it's a much better story than the truth. What's wrong with the truth? Maya stood on her tiptoes to kiss him softly. Nothing at all. But some truths are just for us. James wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as the holiday party continued around them. I love you, Maya Chen, he whispered against her ear. I love you too, James Harrison, she whispered back. For real this time. And in that moment, surrounded by the same corporate world where their fake relationship had begun, their real love story continued to unfold, authentic, complicated, and absolutely nothing like either of them had planned.